Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. If you're reading this, then maybe there's still hope for people like us, the ones who got left behind. 3 days ago, our squad was dropped into what command called the Chicago Red Zone. Supposed to be a simple corridor clearance for civilian evacuation. 12 hours in, 12 hours out, clean and simple. Nothing about this has been clean or simple. Right now, I'm sitting behind a barricade of washing machines in what used to be Suds and Bubbles laundromat on West Madison. The windows are spider-webbed with cracks, held together by strips of duct tape we found in the maintenance closet. Through the gaps, I can see them, the infected, shuffling past like some grotesque parade that never ends. "Carter, you seeing this shit?" Mikey's voice cuts through the perpetual groaning outside. Corporal Mikey Bishop has been my battle buddy since basic training at Fort Benning. Right now, he's propped against a row of dryers, his left leg stretched out at an awkward angle. The field dressing around his thigh is soaked through with blood and something yellowish that makes my stomach turn. "What am I looking at?" I ask, not taking my eyes off the street. "Third washing machine from the left, check the inside." I crawl over, keeping low. The machine's door hangs open, and inside I find a small cache, 2 bottles of water, a pack of crackers, and what looks like prescription pills rattling in an unmarked bottle. "Someone else was here," I whisper. "Yeah, and they're not coming back for it." The silence between us carries weight. We both know what that means in this new world. Mikey took the shrapnel during our last firefight yesterday morning. Not from the infected, from desperate people who thought our gear and weapons were worth killing for. The metal fragment went deep into his thigh, and without proper medical attention, infection has set in. Real infection, not the kind that turns you into one of those things outside. His fever spiked this morning. I've been watching his eyes, looking for signs that he's losing focus, losing himself. So far, he's still Mikey, still cracking jokes about how the apocalypse couldn't wait until after his sister's wedding next month. "Remember that time in Kandahar when you got food poisoning from that street vendor?" he says, wincing as he shifts position. "You mean when you dared me to eat that mystery meat?" "Hey, I said it looked questionable. You're the one who said, 'How bad could it be?'" I almost smile. Almost. But then a shadow passes by the window, tall, wearing what used to be a business suit. Its jaw hangs at an impossible angle, and dark fluid stains the front of its white shirt. The thing stops, tilts its head like it's listening, then continues its aimless wandering. "We can't stay here much longer," I tell Mikey. "Your leg needs real antibiotics, not whatever these pills are." "And go where exactly?" "Last radio chatter said the evac zones were overrun. Command's been silent for 2 days." He's right, and we both know it. Our unit, Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, was supposed to establish a secure perimeter around Grant Park, while helicopters lifted out civilians. The plan lasted exactly 47 minutes before everything went to hell. I remember Sergeant Will screaming into his radio, "We need immediate air support. They're coming from every direction." But the birds never came. The infected swarmed the LZ like ants on spilled sugar. Our squad got separated in the chaos. Last I saw of Will, he was emptying his M4 into a crowd of infected streaming out of the Millennium Park garage. That was 3 days ago. Tom got pulled down while we were trying to reach the secondary rally point. I can still hear his screams. They stopped abruptly, replaced by wet, tearing sounds that haunt my dreams. Jackie made it as far as the Willis Tower before a group of infected cornered him in the lobby. We heard the gunshots echo off the buildings, then silence. Mikey and I ran. We ran like cowards while our brothers died. "Stop it," Mikey says, reading my expression. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "That thing where you blame yourself for surviving." Outside, the groaning gets louder. More of them are gathering near the broken storefront across the street, a cell phone repair shop with its security gate half pulled down. They cluster around something I can't see. their movements becoming more agitated. "They found something," I whisper. Through the scope of my M4, I watch as the infected crowd grows. Their behavior is primitive but coordinated, like pack animals following scent trails. Whatever they're feeding on over there, it's fresh. "Human?" Mikey asks. "Can't tell, but it's drawing more of them." The laundromat suddenly feels smaller, more exposed. The washing machines we've arranged as barriers seem pathetic against what's building across the street. My hands shake as I check my magazine. 17 rounds left. Mikey's got maybe 20 in his M9. Not enough. Not nearly enough. "We need to move," I say. "Tonight, when visibility drops." "Move where? I can barely stand, Carter." "There's a pharmacy 6 blocks north. Saw it on our way in. If we can get there. If. Mikey's voice carries an edge I've never heard before. "Face it, brother, we're pinned down with limited ammunition, no support and no extraction plan. This is it." "Don't talk like that." "Why not? It's the truth." I want to argue, but the words stick in my throat. The truth is, Mikey's right. We're 2 soldiers with depleted supplies in a city overrun by nightmares. The government response has collapsed. The military has retreated to secure zones hundreds of miles away. We're ghosts haunting the ruins of civilization. But we're still breathing, still fighting. "Remember what you told me after my first KIA?" I say. Mikey's expression softens. "We started this together, and we'll finish it together." I complete the phrase we've repeated through 3 deployments. "Brothers in arms. Brothers in arms," he echoes. A crash from outside makes us both freeze. Through the cracked windows, I see an infected has wandered into an overturned shopping cart. The metallic clang echoes down the empty street, and immediately the crowd across the way starts turning in our direction. "Shit," Mikey breathes. The first infected to break away from the group is a woman in a torn nurse's uniform. Her left arm dangles uselessly, but she moves with disturbing purpose toward our building. Behind her, others begin to follow. A businessman missing half his face, a teenager whose school backpack still hangs from one shoulder, an elderly man in a bathrobe stained with unspeakable things. "They smell us," I whisper, raising my rifle. "Or they heard us talking." The nurse reaches our window first. Her remaining eye, milky white and unfocused, seems to look right through the glass at me. She presses her face against the pane, leaving a smear of dark fluid. Her mouth opens, revealing blackened teeth, and she lets out a moan that vibrates through the building. More infected begin to gather. They press against the windows, their weight causing the already damaged glass to bow inward. The tape holds barely. "How many magazines you got left?" Mikey asks, his voice steady despite everything. 3, plus what's loaded. "I've got 2 for the 9mm. We do the math silently, even with perfect shot placement, 1 bullet. 1 kill. We don't have enough ammunition for what's gathering outside. "The back exit?" I suggest. "Tried it yesterday while you were sleeping. Doors blocked by debris from the collapsed building next door. Windows? Painted shut and barred. We're trapped. The infected outside grow more agitated. One of them, the businessman, starts slamming his body against the window. Each impact sends spiderweb cracks spreading across the glass. It won't hold much longer. "Carter," Mikey says quietly. "Yeah? If we don't make it out of this, we will. But if we don't, I want you to know it's been an honor serving with you." I look at my best friend, my brother in everything but blood, and see the fear he's trying to hide. The fever has his shirt soaked in sweat, and his hands tremble from more than just adrenaline. The infection in his leg is spreading faster than either of us wants to admit. "Likewise, Mikey, likewise." The window finally gives way. The window finally. Glass explodes inward as the businessman's body crashes through, followed immediately by the nurse and the teenager. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs and rage, then begin to untangle themselves with horrifying efficiency. "Contact!" I shout, switching to full auto. My first burst catches the businessman center mass, the rounds punching through his chest without slowing him down. I adjust aim, headshots only. The second burst removes the top of his skull and he drops like a marionette with cut strings. Mikey's pistol barks twice. The nurse's head snaps back, brain matter painting the wall behind her. But more are coming through the broken window. The teenager with the backpack, an old woman in a hospital gown, a man in coveralls whose lower jaw is completely missing. We fire controlled bursts, making every shot count. Bodies pile up near the window, but for every infected we drop, 2 more appear. They climb over their fallen companions without hesitation, driven by hunger that death couldn't satisfy. "I'm dry," Mikey calls out, ejecting an empty magazine. "Reloading." I drop behind the washing machine barrier as my bolt locks back on an empty chamber. The infected pour through the broken window like water through a dam. They're in the laundromat now, stumbling over equipment and each other in their eagerness to reach us. The smell hits me, decay and copper, and something sweet that makes bile rise in my throat. Mikey manages to get his fresh magazine seated just as an infected reaches our position. It used to be a construction worker, judging by the hard hat still strapped to its head. Mikey puts 3 round center mass, then 1 through the eye socket. The thing drops, but there are too many. "Back door!" I shout, even though we both know it's blocked. "Fire exit!" Mikey points toward a door I hadn't noticed before, half hidden behind an industrial washing machine. We bound backward, providing covering fire for each other. My rounds punch through infected bodies, some dropping immediately, others barely flinching. The teenager with the backpack takes 4 shots to the chest before a 5th through the forehead finally stops it. Mikey reaches the fire door first and yanks on the handle. It doesn't budge. It's chained shut from the outside. An infected in a bloody wedding dress lurches toward him. I put 2 rounds through her skull just as she reaches for Mikey's throat. "Window!" I point toward a small window high on the back wall. It's barely large enough for a person, but it's our only option. Mikey tries to stand and his wounded leg buckles. He goes down hard, crying out in pain. "I can't make it, Carter." The infected are closing in, a wall of rotting flesh and gnashing teeth. I have maybe 10 seconds before they overwhelm our position. I grab Mikey under the arms and drag him toward the window. He's dead weight, barely conscious from fever and pain. My boots slip on the blood-slicked floor as I struggle to move us both. 5 seconds. An infected reaches us, a postal worker with half his uniform torn away. I put my muzzle against his forehead and pull the trigger. Bone and brain tissue explode backward. 3 seconds. I boost Mikey toward the window. He's barely responsive, but his training kicks in enough for him to grab the window frame and start pulling himself up. 1 second. Hands grab my ankle. I look down to see the old woman in the hospital gown, her dentures missing, gums black with infection. She bites down on my boot, and I feel pressure but no penetration through the leather. I kick her in the face, shattering her nose, and boost myself toward the window just as Mikey tumbles through to the other side. The infected mob reaches the window just as I squeeze through. Hands grab at my legs, but I'm already falling toward the alley below. I hit the pavement hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Pain shoots through my shoulder, but nothing feels broken. Mikey lies in a crumpled heap beside me, conscious but barely. "Can you move?" I ask. "Give me a minute." Through the window above us, infected faces appear. They press against the opening, trying to squeeze through, but the frame is too small. They're trapped up there, at least for now. "We need to go," I tell Mikey. "They'll find another way down." "Where?" I look around the alley. It's narrow, lined with dumpsters and debris. At the far end, I can see the street, and more infected wandering aimlessly. "Pharmacy's still 6 blocks north," I say. "We can make it if we stay quiet." Mikey nods, gritting his teeth as I help him to his feet. His weight leans heavily on me, and I can feel the fever radiating through his uniform. "Brothers in arms?" he asks. "Brothers in arms," I confirm. We start moving through the alley, 2 soldiers in a dead city, carrying each other toward an uncertain future. Behind us, the infected continue their attempts to follow, their frustrated moans echoing off the brick walls. The sun is setting over Chicago, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of orange and red. Soon it will be dark and the real nightmare will begin. But we're still alive, Still together, still fighting. And that has to be enough. The alley stank of rotting garbage and something worse, something that made my eyes water and my stomach clench. Mikey leaned heavily against my shoulder as we picked our way through the debris, his breathing shallow and labored. Every few steps he'd stumble, and I'd feel his fever burning through his uniform. "How much further?" he whispered. 4 blocks, maybe 5. I checked my watch, 8:47 p.m. Full darkness had settled over Chicago like a burial shroud. The only light came from scattered fires burning throughout the city, casting dancing shadows that made everything look like movement. We hugged the walls, avoiding the main streets where infected wandered in groups. Through broken windows and doorways, I caught glimpses of the chaos that had consumed the city. Overturned furniture, blood smears on walls, personal belongings scattered like confetti after a parade nobody wanted to attend. A car alarm blared somewhere in the distance, then cut off abruptly. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. "Remember that night in Fallujah?" Mikey asked, his voice barely audible. "When we got separated from the convoy?" "You mean when you insisted we could find our way back using the stars? Hey, we made it, didn't we? After walking in circles for 6 hours." He managed a weak chuckle that turned into a coughing fit. When it subsided, I noticed dark spots on his hand. Blood. The pharmacy sat on the corner of State and Monroe, its neon cross sign dark and lifeless. The front windows were spider-webbed with cracks but still intact. More importantly, I couldn't see any infected moving around inside. "Looks clear," I whispered. "Too clear," Mikey replied. "Nothing's that easy anymore." He was right, but we didn't have options. His fever was getting worse, and the infection in his leg had started to smell sweet and rotten. Without antibiotics, he'd be dead by morning. The front door hung open, its glass panel shattered. I raised my M4 and stepped inside, Mikey close behind me. The pharmacy's interior was a disaster zone. Shelves toppled, medications scattered across the floor, ceiling tiles hanging at odd angles. But it was empty. "Someone beat us here," Mikey observed. Most of the shelves were picked clean, but I started searching anyway. Behind the pharmacy counter, I found a small refrigerated unit that was still sealed. Inside, jackpot. Vials of antibiotics, pain medication, and other supplies that desperate people had missed. "Bingo?" I called softly. Mikey limped over, using a walking cane he'd found somewhere. Thank God for junkies who don't know what they're looking for. I was loading antibiotics into my pack when I heard it. Voices outside, human voices. Saw them go in there. 2 of them looked military. Gear's worth more than whatever pills they're after. I motioned for silence and moved toward the broken window. 3 figures stood in the street. A man in a torn business suit, a woman with a baseball bat, and a teenager holding what looked like a machete. They weren't infected. They were something potentially worse. Desperate survivors who decided taking from others was easier than finding their own supplies. "We need to go," I whispered to Mikey. "Now." "Back door?" I'd already checked. "Chain shut." The voices grew closer. Through the window, I watched the woman signal to the others. They were spreading out, preparing to surround the building. "How many rounds you got left?" Mikey asked. "Maybe 30. Total." "I've got 12. The man in the business suit appeared in the doorway, a sawed-off shotgun in his hands. "We know you're in there," he called out. "Just leave your weapons and medical supplies by the door and nobody gets hurt." I looked at Mikey. His face was pale with fever, but his eyes were clear and determined. We both knew how this would end if we gave up our weapons. "Counteroffer," I called back. "Walk away and we won't have to kill you." The man laughed. 2 against 3 and one of you's bleeding all over the floor. I like our odds." "Your call," I replied, shouldering my rifle. The woman with the baseball bat tried to flank us through a side window. I put 2 rounds center mass before she could climb through. She dropped backward into the street, her bat clattering on concrete. The teenager rushed through the front door, machete raised. Mikey's pistol barked twice, once in the chest, once in the head. The kid went down hard, that left the leader. "You killed my boy," the man screamed. "You killed my son." His shotgun boomed and pellets shredded the pharmacy counter above my head. I rolled right, coming up behind a display rack of vitamins. His second shot punched through the rack, sending pills and bottles flying. Mikey was pinned behind the pharmacy counter, unable to move quickly with his injured leg. The man advanced, pumping another shell into the chamber. "Military thinks they're so tough," he snarled. "Let's see how tough you are with a gut full of buckshot." I lined up my shot and squeezed the trigger. The round caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. His shotgun discharged into the ceiling, raining down plaster and debris. He tried to bring the weapon back around, but I was already moving. 3 quick steps brought me within arm's reach. I grabbed the shotgun barrel and drove my rifle butt into his face. His nose exploded in a spray of blood, and he went down gasping. "Please," he wheezed. "That was my son, my only son." I stared down at him, this broken man who'd tried to rob us, who'd forced us to kill a teenager. In the old world, I might have felt sympathy. Now I just felt tired. "Should have walked away," I said. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 more people dead because the world had gone insane and everyone was just trying to survive. "We need to move," Mikey said. He'd managed to inject himself with antibiotics and was already looking slightly better. "Gunshots will draw them." He was right. In the distance, I could hear the responding moans of infected drawn by the noise. We gathered what medical supplies we could carry and headed for the back of the building. The rear exit was indeed chained shut, but the chains were old and rusted. A few kicks with my boot sent them clattering to the ground. We stepped out into another alley, this one narrower and darker than the last. "Which way?" Mikey asked. Before I could answer, shapes emerged from the shadows at both ends of the alley. Infected, maybe a dozen of them, drawn by the gunfire. They moved with that horrible shuffling gait, arms outstretched, mouths hanging open in permanent hunger. "Up," I said, pointing to a fire escape ladder about 8 feet above our heads. I boosted Mikey up first, his weight nearly collapsing my shoulders. He grabbed the bottom rung and started climbing, moving slowly but steadily. I followed, pulling myself up just as the first infected reached the spot where we'd been standing. The fire escape led to the roof of a 3-story building. From up there, I could see the full scope of Chicago's destruction. Fires burned throughout the downtown area, sending pillars of smoke into the night sky. Abandoned vehicles clogged every street, some still running with their doors hanging open where people had fled on foot. And everywhere, moving through the orange-lit streets like ants, were the infected. "Jesus," Mikey breathed. "There's thousands of them." "Tens of thousands," I corrected. "Maybe more." We moved across the rooftop, looking for a way down that wouldn't put us back at street level with the horde. The building connected to another via a narrow gap, maybe 4 feet across. "Can you make that jump?" I asked Mikey. He looked at his injured leg, then at the gap. "Do I have a choice?" "I go first, then catch you." I backed up, took a running start, and leaped across the void. My boots hit the opposite roof hard, and I rolled to absorb the impact. When I looked back, Mikey was preparing for his jump. "You got this," I called softly. He nodded, took a deep breath, and launched himself across the gap. For a terrifying moment, it looked like he wouldn't make it. His injured leg buckled on takeoff and he came up short. I caught his arms just as he hit the edge of the roof, his legs dangling over the alley below. Pain shot through my shoulders as I hauled him up, but somehow I managed to get him onto solid ground. "Thanks, brother," he gasped. "Always." We continued across rooftops for another hour, moving slowly and carefully. Mikey's antibiotics were helping, but he was still weak and feverish. Twice we had to hide from helicopters, not rescue birds, but military aircraft that fired on anything that moved in the streets below. It was past midnight when we finally found what we were looking for, a building with intact fire escapes and no infected visible in the surrounding area. We climbed down carefully, emerging in a small courtyard behind what used to be a coffee shop. "We need shelter," I told Mikey. "Somewhere to hole up until you're stronger." Agreed, but where? I was scanning the area when I heard it, a wet dragging sound coming from the coffee shop's rear entrance. The door stood slightly ajar, and something was moving in the darkness beyond. I signaled for Mikey to stay back and approached the door with my rifle raised. The smell hit me first, decay and copper and human waste. I pushed the door open with my rifle barrel and stepped inside. The coffee shop's interior was a charnel house. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, some fresh, others beginning to decompose, and moving among them, feeding with methodical efficiency, was an infected wearing a barista's apron. It looked up when I entered, its face smeared with gore, and let out a low moan. But this wasn't the mindless hunger I'd seen before. This thing was crouched over a body, systematically tearing chunks of flesh and chewing them with deliberate purpose. "Carter?" Mikey's voice came from behind me. "Stay back," I whispered. The infected stood slowly, tilting its head as if studying me. Blood dripped from its fingers, and something that might have been intestines hung from its mouth like macabre pasta. I put 3 rounds center mass. The thing staggered but didn't fall. It took a step forward, then another, arms reaching for me with determined purpose. A headshot finally dropped it. "Clear," I called to Mikey. He limped inside, took one look around, and shook his head. "This is getting worse." "What do you mean?" "They're not just biting anymore. They're feeding. Really feeding." He was right. The bodies in the coffee shop had been systematically consumed, not just torn apart in frenzied attacks. Whatever the infection was doing to people, it was evolving their behavior. "We can't stay here," I said. "Where then?" I was about to answer when we heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. Not the typical moaning of infected, but something else. A wet clicking noise like teeth chattering in a cold mouth. It was coming from the basement. "Time to go," Mikey said. We headed for the front exit, but froze when we saw what waited outside. The street was full of infected, not wandering aimlessly like before, but standing perfectly still, all facing the coffee shop, all facing us. They knew we were inside. "Back door," I whispered. But when we reached the rear entrance, more infected waited in the courtyard. They'd surrounded the building while we were inside, and now they stood in perfect silence, watching the exits. "They're hunting us," Mikey said. "Actually hunting us." The clicking sound from the basement grew louder, joined by others. Whatever was down there was coming up. I checked my ammunition, 18 rounds left. Mikey had maybe 8 in his pistol, against dozens of infected who seemed to be coordinating their attack. "Ideas?" Mikey asked. I looked around the coffee shop, searching for anything that could help us. In the corner, I spotted a maintenance ladder leading to the roof. "Up," I said. We climbed quickly, Mikey struggling with his wounded leg but managing to keep pace. Behind us, the clicking sounds grew closer, joined by the wet shuffle of footsteps on linoleum. The roof access door slammed shut, just as something began pounding on it from below. Through the small window, I caught a glimpse of what had been pursuing us. Infected, but wrong somehow. Their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. "The pharmacy supplies," Mikey said suddenly. "One of those antibiotics was experimental. I saw the label, some kind of neurological enhancement drug." "You think it's affecting them?" "I think we're not dealing with regular zombies anymore." The pounding on the door intensified, joined by more hands, more fists. The metal began to buckle under the assault. "They're getting smarter," I said, "which means we need to get smarter too." Looking across the street, I spotted our salvation, a crashed delivery truck, its rear doors hanging open. If we could reach it, the truck's cargo area might provide temporary shelter. "There," I pointed. We jumped to the next building, then down to street level behind that truck. That's a hell of a jump. Better than staying here. The roof access door exploded outward, and infected poured onto the roof. But these weren't the shambling corpses we'd fought before. They moved with horrible coordination, spreading out to cut off our escape routes. "Go!" I shouted. We ran for the edge of the building and leaped into the night. For a moment, we were airborne above the infected-filled street, suspended between death and hope. Then we hit the next rooftop hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Behind us, the infected gathered at the edge of the building. staring down at us with those milky dead eyes. But they didn't follow. They just watched. "They're learning," Mikey said. "They're actually learning." We climbed down the fire escape as quickly as Mikey's leg would allow. The infected in the street turned to track our movement, but they moved slowly, deliberately, like predators conserving energy for the right moment to strike. The delivery truck sat 30 yards away, 30 yards of open street filled with creatures that were becoming more dangerous by the hour. "Ready?" I asked. Mikey checked his pistol one last time. "Let's do this." We sprinted across the street, weaving between abandoned cars and debris. The infected began to move, converging on our position with terrifying efficiency. But we were faster, fueled by desperation and military training. I reached the truck first and hauled myself into the cargo area. Mikey was right behind me, diving through the doors just as an infected in a postal uniform grabbed for his ankle. I slammed the doors shut and found the internal locking mechanism. Outside, infected began to gather around the truck, but the metal walls held. "Safe," Mikey gasped. "For now." That's when I felt it, a sharp pain in my left forearm. I looked down and saw 4 puncture wounds already beginning to swell and discolor. During our escape from the coffee shop, when an infected had grabbed for Mikey's ankle, it had caught me instead. I just hadn't felt it through the adrenaline. "Mikey," I said quietly. He looked over and saw the bite mark. His face went pale. "How long?" he asked. "I don't know. Few minutes, maybe." We stared at each other in the dim light filtering through the truck's windows. Both of us knew what this meant. I had maybe hours before the fever started, maybe a day before I turned into one of those things outside. "Brothers in arms," Mikey said softly. "Brothers in arms," I replied. Outside, the infected continued to gather, their clicking and moaning creating a symphony of death that would haunt my dreams, however many I had left. We were both infected now, both dying, but we were still together and we still had time to figure out what came next. The night was far from over. Dawn crept over Chicago like a disease, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of amber and rust. I sat in the back of the delivery truck watching the bite marks on my forearm darken from red to purple to something closer to black. The infection was spreading faster than I'd expected, hot lines of pain radiating up toward my shoulder with each heartbeat. Mikey lay across from me, his own fever climbing steadily. The antibiotics had bought him time, but the zombie bite on his ankle was winning the war. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and his breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps. "How you holding up, brother?" I asked. "Been better," he wheezed. "Been worse too, though. Remember that IED outside Mosul? You mean when you insisted on carrying me 3 miles with a broken leg? Someone had to keep your sorry ass alive long enough to write my recommendation for promotion." I almost smiled. Even dying, Mikey was still making jokes. Outside the truck, the infected had multiplied during the night. Through the small windows, I could see dozens of them standing in perfect formation around our makeshift shelter. They weren't clawing at the metal or trying to break in. They were just waiting, patient, like they knew we'd have to come out eventually. "They're getting smarter," I said, "or we're getting dumber." Mikey struggled to sit up, wincing as movement sent fresh waves of pain through his body. "Either way, we can't stay here forever." He was right. The truck's cargo area was maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, hardly enough space for a last stand. And with both of us infected, time was running out fast. I pulled out my field notebook and started writing. If we weren't going to make it out of this, someone needed to know what happened. Someone needed to understand how the world ended for 2 soldiers who'd promised to stick together. Day 4, 06:30 hours. This is Specialist Ethan Carter, 101st Airborne. If anyone finds this, know that we fought until the end. "What are you doing?" Mikey asked. "Leaving a record. Someone should know how this went down. Make sure you mention that I looked better than you, even while dying. I'll mention you were ugly as sin but brave as hell." Fair enough. I continued writing, documenting our mission, the collapse of our unit, the 3 days we'd survived in the red zone. My handwriting grew shaky as the infection progressed, but I forced myself to keep going. A sound outside made us both freeze, metal scraping against concrete. Through the rear window, I watched in amazement as an infected pushed a shopping cart aside to clear a path. Not the mindless shambling we'd seen before, but deliberate problem-solving. Jesus, Mikey breathed. They're organizing. More infected began moving with purpose, arranging themselves in what looked like a coordinated formation. Some carried improvised weapons, pieces of rebar, broken bottles, chunks of concrete. They were learning to use tools. "We need to move," I said. "Now, while we still can." "Move where?" "There's got to be 50 of them out there." I studied the street layout through the windows. Most of the infected were concentrated around the truck, but there was a gap near the collapsed storefront across the street. If we could reach it, we might find another way out. "Building collapse," I pointed. "Looks like something heavy went through the front wall." Mikey squinted through the window. "That's not a building collapse. That's a tank." He was right. Through the debris and twisted metal, I could make out the distinctive shape of an M1 Abrams main battle tank. It had crashed through the storefront and come to rest halfway inside the building, its turret pointing toward the street at an odd angle. "Must have happened during the initial outbreak," I said. "Tank crew probably lost control when the infection hit. Or when they realized the city was lost and nobody was coming to help them. The tank represented our best chance for shelter. Its armor would protect us from the infected, and if there were any crew members still inside, they might have supplies or ammunition we could use. That's our target," I decided. "Through 50 zombie soldiers using tools." "You got a better idea?" Mikey checked his pistol one last time. "Brothers in arms?" "Brothers in arms." I gathered our remaining supplies, a few medical items, my rifle with 12 rounds left, and the notebook where I'd been documenting our journey. Everything else we'd have to leave behind. The truck's rear doors faced away from the heaviest concentration of infected. If we moved fast and quiet, we might reach the tank before they realized what was happening. I eased the doors open, wincing as they creaked softly. The morning air carried the stench of decay and smoke, but also something else. Something chemical and sharp that made my eyes water. "Gas leak," Mikey whispered. "Probably from the tank crash." We slipped out of the truck and immediately crouched behind an overturned car. The infected were maybe 20 yards away, still maintaining their formation but facing the wrong direction. Their improved intelligence hadn't yet extended to posting sentries. We moved in bounds, one covering while the other advanced, using abandoned vehicles and debris for concealment. Military training took over, overriding the fever and pain that racked our bodies. For a few minutes, we were soldiers again instead of dying men. The first infected spotted us when we were halfway across the street. It had been a construction worker, judging by the hard hat still strapped to its skull. Instead of the mindless moan I expected, it made a sharp clicking sound, like a signal. Immediately, the other infected began turning in our direction. Their movements were coordinated, disciplined. They spread out to cut off our escape routes while others moved to flank us. "Contact!" I shouted, dropping to one knee and opening fire. My first burst caught the construction worker's center mass, punching through its chest without slowing it down. I adjusted aim and put 2 rounds through its skull. It dropped, but 3 more took its place. Mikey's pistol barked steadily beside me, each shot precisely placed. But for every infected we dropped, more appeared from side streets and buildings. They emerged from manholes, from storm drains, from places we hadn't even known they could hide. "Suppressing fire," I called, laying down covering shots while Mikey bounded toward the tank. An infected in a police uniform rushed me from the left, moving faster than should have been possible. I put 3 rounds in its chest before it finally went down, but not before its reaching fingers raked across my shoulder, tearing through my uniform and flesh beneath. "Carter!" Mikey had reached the tank and was yanking on the commander's hatch. "It's stuck!" I fired my last rounds and ran for the tank, infected converging from all directions. One grabbed my ankle, a woman in a nurse's uniform, and I went down hard. Her teeth snapped inches from my throat before Mikey's final pistol shot removed the top of her head. Together, we hauled on the tank's hatch until it finally broke free. The compartment below was dark and reeked of death, but it was shelter. I dropped through first, landing hard on something soft that squished under my boots. Tank crew. 2 bodies in various stages of decomposition, their uniforms marking them as armor crewmen. One still wore his CVC helmet, though his skull had been caved in by something blunt. The other had apparently taken his own life. A pistol lay beside his hand, and the tank's interior wall was painted with dark stains. Mikey tumbled through the hatch behind me, slamming it shut just as infected hands began pounding on the tank's exterior. The sound echoed through the cramped compartment like thunder. "Secure," I gasped. "For now." The tank's interior was a tomb. Besides the dead crew, the compartment was littered with personal effects, photographs, letters from home, a small Bible with blood-stained pages. These men had died alone, surrounded by horrors they couldn't fight. "Poor bastards," Mikey said, looking at the bodies. "At least they had armor. We just had each other. Don't sell us short. We made it further than most." I found a working flashlight among the crew's gear and began exploring the tank's systems. Most were dead. No power, no communications, no main gun. But the armor was intact, and that was all we needed now. Mikey slumped against the turret, his breathing becoming more labored. The infection had progressed rapidly during our escape, and his skin had taken on the grayish pallor I'd seen in the early stages of transformation. "How long do you think we have?" he asked. I looked at my own bite marks, now black and spreading up my arm like ink through water. "Few hours, maybe less." "Good." I was getting tired of being sick. Outside, the infected continued their assault on the tank, but instead of mindless pounding, they seemed to be testing the armor systematically, looking for weak points. I could hear them moving around the vehicle, communicating in those sharp clicking sounds. "They're learning," I said. "Let them learn. Steel's steel." I pulled out my notebook and continued writing by flashlight. The words came slowly now, my handwriting deteriorating as fever clouded my thoughts. But I forced myself to keep going, documenting everything. The mission, the outbreak, the evolution of the infected. The zombies are changing. They use tools now, coordinate attacks, solve problems. This isn't the mindless horde from the movies. This is something worse. "You writing our obituary?" Mikey asked. "Our testimony. Someone needs to know what we saw. Make sure you mention I was the better soldier. I'll mention you were the better friend." He smiled at that, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him in hours. "Works for me." The fever was taking hold of both of us now. I could feel it burning through my system, changing me from the inside out. My vision blurred periodically and strange thoughts crept into my mind, violent impulses I'd never experienced before. Mikey was fighting the same battle. I watched him clench his fists as waves of aggression washed over him, his face contorting with the effort of maintaining control. "It's starting," he said through gritted teeth. "How long until we turn?" "Not long enough." I looked around the tank compartment, searching for inspiration, for hope, for anything that might extend our time. My eyes fell on the dead crewman's pistol, a .45 caliber M1911, with 1 round left in the magazine. "Mikey," I said quietly. He followed my gaze and nodded slowly. "When it's time, we'll know. Yeah, we'll know." I returned to my writing, racing against the fever that threatened to steal my humanity. The words flowed faster now, driven by desperation and the knowledge that this might be the last coherent thing I ever did. Corporal Mike Bishop was the best soldier I ever served with. He stayed with me when he could have run. He fought beside me when he was already dying. If there's any justice left in this world, someone will read this and know that heroes existed, even at the end. We kept our promise. We started this together in the red zone, and we're finishing it together. Brothers in arms until death and beyond. Outside, the infected had grown quiet. Through the tank's periscope, I could see them arranged in perfect formation around the vehicle, standing motionless like an honor guard, waiting. "They know," Mikey said. "They can sense we're changing." "Good. Let them wait." The fever spiked suddenly, sending waves of heat through my body. For a moment, everything went red. and I felt an overwhelming urge to kill, to feed, to hunt. The sensation lasted only seconds, but it left me shaking. "Carter?" Mikey's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Still here, still me." "Good, because I don't think I have much longer." I looked at my friend, my brother, and saw the infection had progressed even further. His eyes were beginning to cloud over, and dark veins showed through his skin like a roadmap to hell. "The gun," he said simply. I picked up the .45 and checked the chamber. 1 round, just enough. "Together?" I asked. Together. We sat side by side in the cramped tank compartment, surrounded by the dead and dying. Outside, the infected waited with infinite patience for their newest recruits, but we would deny them that satisfaction. "Thank you," Mikey said, "for everything. Thank you for being my brother. Always." I raised the pistol, and for a moment we were back in basic training, young and stupid and convinced we'd live forever. We were in Afghanistan, watching each other's backs in hostile territory. We were in Chicago, making our last stand against an enemy that couldn't be defeated. "On 3, I said, "on 3. 1. The infection surged through me again. Stronger this time. My vision went dark for several seconds, and when it cleared, I was looking at Mikey through eyes that didn't feel quite like my own. 2. Mikey's breathing had stopped. His eyes stared straight ahead, clouded and vacant. But as I watched, something flickered behind them. Not intelligence, but hunger. He was turning. I finished my final entry in the notebook. "We kept our promise, brothers in arms, brothers in death. If anyone finds this, know that we fought with honor. Know that we chose our end rather than becoming the enemy. Specialist Ethan Carter, 101st Airborne. Out. 3.